Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Amritpal Singh. Over the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and from around the world. We'll update you about the happenings in the world of business and sports, and we'll get you some interesting stories that are making the headlines. But first up, the big news of this hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launches the nationwide Ayushman Bharat digital mission today, a seamless online platform that will enable interoperability with the digital health ecosystem presently being implemented in pilot phase in 6 union territories. Common man faces problems due to Bharat Bandh called with regard to farm laws. Health and other civic services face hurdles. Union Agriculture Minister says government ready to talk to farmers on every issue relating to farmers. Cyclonic storm Gulab over North Andhra Pradesh and adjoining South Odisha weakened into a deep depression early morning today over North Andhra Pradesh, likely to continue to move northwestwards and weaken further into a depression during the next 6 hours. Prime Minister discusses Cyclone Gulab situation with Chief Ministers of Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and assures all possible help. A key initiative for development of Jammu and Kashmir, Union Road Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari inaugurates commencement of several highway projects, says the state will not be outside the development stream. Union I&B Minister Anurag Singh Thakur visits the historic Kheer Bhavani Temple in Ganderbal district of Jammu and Kashmir, inaugurates several sports projects during his present tour. And in international news, Germany's Social Democrats narrowly win the national election as per projected results and claimed a clear mandate to lead a government for the first time since 2005 to end 16 years of conservative rule led under Angela Merkel. Iceland becomes the first European country where women make up more than half of all the lawmakers in the parliament. And in sports, Indo-China pairs Sania Mirza, Zhang Shuai bagged the WTA Ostrava Open doubles title. Second-seeded Indo-Chinese duo defeated the third-seeded pair of American Christian and New Zealander Rotterdam 6-3, 6-2 in the summit clash. Those were the headlines, and let's now begin with our big news of the hour. In a historic initiative, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today launched the Ayushman Bharat digital mission via video conferencing. Currently, Ayushman Bharat digital mission was implemented in 6 union territories in a pilot phase, but it has been rolled out to the nation. Addressing the event, the Prime Minister said, "Today is an important day for the country's healthcare sector as this mission leverages technology to improve access to healthcare and opens doors for new innovation in the sector."
बीते 7 वर्षों में देश की स्वास्थ्य सुविधाओं को मजबूत करने का जो अभियान चल रहा है, वो आज से एक नए चरण में प्रवेश कर रहा है। और ये सामान्य चरण नहीं है, ये असामान्य चरण है। आज एक ऐसे मिशन की शुरुआत हो रही है जिसमें भारत की स्वास्थ्य सुविधाओं में क्रांतिकारी परिवर्तन लाने की बहुत बड़ी ताकत है।
The Prime Minister said that under the mission, every citizen will be given a health ID that will also work as a health account to which personal health records can be linked and viewed with the help of a mobile application.
आयुष्मान भारत डिजिटल मिशन अब पूरे देश के अस्पतालों के डिजिटल हेल्थ सॉल्यूशंस को एक दूसरे से कनेक्ट करेगा। इसके तहत देशवासियों को अब एक डिजिटल हेल्थ आईडी मिलेगी। हर नागरिक का हेल्थ रिकॉर्ड डिजिटली सुरक्षित रहेगा। डिजिटल हेल्थ आईडी के माध्यम से मरीज खुद भी और डॉक्टर भी पुराने रिकॉर्ड को जरूरत पड़ने पर चेक कर सकता है।
Prime Minister Modi said that the mission will play a big role in eliminating problems in the medical treatment of poor and middle class sections of society.
ये मिशन देश के गरीब और मध्यम वर्ग के इलाज में होने वाली जो दिक्कतें हैं, उन दिक्कतों को दूर करने में बहुत बड़ी भूमिका निभाएगा। टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से मरीजों को पूरे देश के हजारों अस्पतालों से कनेक्ट करने का जो काम आयुष्मान भारत ने किया है, आज उसे भी विस्तार मिल रहा है, एक मजबूत टेक्नोलॉजी प्लेटफॉर्म मिल रहा है।
The Prime Minister said that today the primary health care center near villages and homes in the country is being empowered with health and welfare centers. These centers ensure elaborate health services to the locals.
आज देश में गांव और घर के निकट ही प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर से जुड़े नेटवर्क को हेल्थ एंड वेलनेस सेंटर में उससे सशक्त किया जा रहा है। अभी तक ऐसे लगभग 80,000 सेंटर्स चालू हो चुके हैं। ये सेंटर्स रूटीन चेकअप और टीकाकरण से लेकर गंभीर बीमारियों की शुरुआती जांच और अनेक प्रकार के टेस्ट की सुविधाओं से लैस हैं।
The Prime Minister said that telemedicine has expanded phenomenally during the COVID period. He added that about 1.25 crore remote consultations have been completed so far through e-Sanjeevani.
कोरोना काल में टेली मेडिसिन का भी अभूतपूर्व विस्तार हुआ है। ई संजीवनी के माध्यम से अब तक लगभग 1.25 करोड़ रिमोट कंसल्टेशन पूरे हो चुके हैं। ये सुविधा हर रोज देश के दूर सुदूर में रहने वाले हजारों देशवासियों को घर बैठे ही शहरों के बड़े अस्पतालों के बड़े बड़े डॉक्टरों से कनेक्ट कर रही है। जाने माने डॉक्टरों की सेवा आसान हो सकी है।
The Prime Minister said that unprecedented reforms are also taking place in medical education to transform India's health sector. He added that more doctors and paramedical manpower are getting ready in the country today than before.
भारत के हेल्थ सेक्टर को ट्रांसफॉर्म करने के लिए मेडिकल एजुकेशन में भी अभूतपूर्व रिफॉर्म्स हो रहे हैं। 7-8 साल में पहले की तुलना में आज अधिक डॉक्टर्स और पैरामेडिकल मैन पावर देश में तैयार हो रही है। सिर्फ मैन पावर ही नहीं, बल्कि हेल्थ से जुड़ी आधुनिक टेक्नोलॉजी, बायोटेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ी रिसर्च, दवाओं और उपकरणों में आत्मनिर्भरता को लेकर भी देश में मिशन मोड पर काम चल रहा है।
And for more on that, I'm joined by my colleague Abhishek Jha. Abhishek, give us a sense of What does this Ayushman Bharat digital mission mean? What will it do? How will it revolutionize the health services in the country?
So Amrit, with this the digitization of the health card, people will have all their past medical records registered on a website or a server. And when they go to consult a doctor for their ailments, the doctor will have the ability to look at the past record of the patient, and that will not only cut time for the diagnosis process, but also it will give a better sense of idea how to go about the future course of treatment for a doctor. At the same time, the patient will also have access to all sort of medicine. We know that there are traditional medicine, Indian ways of medicine, Ayurveda, Unani, homeopathy, allopathy. So this ID card will also provide interoperability for a patient when he can switch from one way of medication to the other way of treatment, and that will be seamless. Also, the data, all the medical record, which is seriously very sensitive for every person. The government has said that the secrecy and privacy of all these data will be ensured, and one can always be clear about these things, that all the history of medical history of a person is actually going to help him for future references whenever he goes to consult a doctor for his or her treatment.
So you're basically saying that every citizen in the country will get a digital ID or a health ID, and that medical record of the individual will be digitalized, so that when he goes to the doctor, he can access that, and any doctor can access that from anywhere when the patient so authorizes him to. Is that so?
Exactly, Amrit, and this also gives patient a whole, the countrywide access to various doctors and facilities and critical care system. We know that, for example, if a person is having certain elements of heart disease, and he may be living in a place where the heart patient or the heart facility for treatment of his type of ailment is not very much available, he can easily have access and information as to where he can go and get himself treated in a better healthcare system. And this every data about patient is obviously there in this ID card, but a patient can also have access to all the information of where are the medical facilities, where are the best doctors, where are the best care centers, and it will help them to get themselves treated in a very more holistic way, and this will also smoothen their a lot of other logistical burdens.
Abhishek, give us a sense of this mission was now being brought in from today pan India, but it was already on a pilot project in 6 states and union territories. What has been the experience there? How much of penetration has it been able to achieve? Are people using it? Is it proving to be helpful to people? What are the reports, if any, shared on how the mission has been where it was introduced as a pilot project?
So, Amrit, this mission was launched as a pilot project in 6 union territories that you have also named. But now, with the success of those concepts that the government and the agencies wanted to first test the water, how the systems are going to work, what could be the glitches, where else, what could be the digital problems that a patient can face. But once those things have been sorted and learned, now this whole digital card is going to be rolled out across the nation. There is a number of Ayushman card has been not as expectedly, not as many Ayushman card have been allocated as government may have initialized, because almost 15 crore Ayushman card have been so far given to people. But the basis for giving an Ayushman card has been the 2011 census, which says almost 50 crore, almost 53 crore people in the entire nation will be eligible for this Ayushman card. And so this now the Health Minister Mansukh Mandaviya has directed the officials across the country that they should work on a war footing, so that in the remaining part of financial year, almost 10 crore Ayushman card could be allocated to the needy people. So with this coming age of technology also, we can hope that the new Ayushman card will be digitized. They will be obviously Aadhaar linked. So when a patient has to go and get himself treated, he will have surely less number of cards in his pocket because of the digitally linked Ayushman card.
Okay. And Abhishek, give us a sense of, the Prime Minister referred to how e-Sanjeevani was especially helpful during the COVID times when people, weren't physically or people were avoiding physically meeting doctors, and doctors were also avoiding physically meeting unless the patient was in a critical stage or required personal audience with the doctor. So, will in this Ayushman Bharat digital mission, that pool that you're talking about, where the person will have access to information, does he have an access to a pool of varied doctors around the country, where he can probably teleconsult or contact through a digital medium over the internet, etc.?
Of course, Amrit, in fact, this whole Ayushman scheme that government has said has proved its relevance in this time of crisis, when we saw in the hours of COVID crisis how the healthcare system was not prepared to treat patients physically, and so many of us, we also had to go for this telemedicine consultation, which was until now quite a concept. People did not have very practical idea how will it work, but with this crisis of corona, everybody had learned new ways of life, and we have seen the telemedicine and teleconsultation has also worked well in so many cases. And with this ID card that government is trying to provide to every citizen, people will not only have access to their own medical past record, because we also tend to forget our past prescriptions and past diagnosis record in houses. So this is also going to give us also a sense of well documented history of our medical ailments or medical problems. And when we want to consult a particular doctor, we will also have information, a pool of doctors, and so that we can go and consult directly to them. Also, this Ayushman card was basically designed to provide a ready to able to a sort of cashless card facility, where a patient who was not very much resourceful or did not have enough of money and could not get proper medical treatment in certain government hospital of nearby, he can go and get himself treated and taken care of in some certain private hospitals. And the card was supposed to help him get admitted without giving any money, and the government was going to incur all the expenses, take care of all the expenses. So basically that insurance scheme against any ailments or future medical problems is also going to be available on this digital ID that government is going to give to people. But beside that, it will also have a history of a patient. It will also have number of a pool of doctors, medical facilities across the country, so that a patient can also take a very informed call as to where does he actually want to get treated and where he's going to get a best treatment for his problems.
All right, Abhishek, we'll leave it there. Many thanks for joining us and giving us this update. Thank you. And let's now move on to our developing story. Today, more than 40 farmers' organizations across the country have announced a Bharat Bandh. The United Kisan Morcha said that the Bandh has been organized from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Delhi police has tightened security amid announcement of the Bharat Bandh. Arrangements have been made in and around the national capital. Delhi police has increased vigil at the border. Massive congestion is being seen on roads in Noida and Gurugram. And Union Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar has once again said that the government is ready to talk to farmers on every issue relating to farmers.
मैं किसान बंधुओं को आग्रह करना चाहता हूं कि वो आंदोलन का रास्ता छोड़कर वार्ता का रास्ता अपनाएं। सरकार उनके द्वारा बताई गई आपत्ति पर विचार करने के लिए तैयार है। और इससे पहले भी कई बार बात हो चुकी है, लेकिन इसके बाद भी अगर उन्हें लगता है कोई बात बची है तो ज़रूर सरकार बात करेगी। मैं समझता हूँ किसान आंदोलन को राजनीति से नहीं जोड़ना चाहिए। किसान सबका है और सरकार बहुत संवेदनशीलता के साथ किसान यूनियन के साथ बातचीत की है और आगे भी करने के लिए तैयार है।
And now moving on to our national prime segment. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu is on a 5-day visit to Rajasthan. Today he interacted with the officials at the Longewala War Museum at the military station in Jaisalmer. The Vice President paid tributes to the martyrs at the museum complex and also planted saplings in the campus. Rajasthan Governor Kalraj Mishra and State Government Minister B.D. Kalla were also present on the occasion. And later the Vice President addressed a Sainik Sammelan in Jaisalmer and lauded the border security force. He said the BSF are the first line of defense, adding that security is essential to ensuring development of the nation.
You are the first line of defense, as rightly said. देश के विकास के लिए सुरक्षा का वातावरण जरूरी है, जो हमारे सुरक्षा बल हर कठिनाई को बावजूद भी सुनिश्चित करते हैं। देश की आंतरिक सुरक्षा हो, आतंकवाद हो या नक्सली हिंसा हो, सुरक्षित बलों के कारण ही देश इन उपद्रवों पर नियंत्रण पा सका है।
Speaking on the occasion, the Vice President lashed out at Pakistan and said that the neighboring country is funding, training and nurturing terrorists, while he also accused Pakistan of spreading false narratives of India at global platforms and said that the country is jealous of India's development and trying to create unrest in India.
Our neighbor is aiding, abetting, training, funding terrorism. It is highly objectionable, not acceptable, condemnable. They are jealous of our progress. They are jealous that India is moving on, moving faster. That's why they adopt these methods of terrorist को, infiltrator को सहायता देना, मदद देना और दुनिया भर में जाके गलत प्रचार करना भारत के बारे में। They want to create terror, they want to create unrest, and they want to create our economy. They want to stop the progress of India. This is not acceptable. This has been the history of our neighboring country.
And an update on the nationwide COVID vaccination drive. In a landmark achievement, India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed the 86 crore milestone. As per the latest data, over 86 crore 1 lakh vaccine doses have been administered across the country so far. Over 38 lakh 18,000 vaccine doses have been administered in the last 24 hours. Further, the recovery of 29,621 patients in the last 24 hours has increased the cumulative tally of recovered patients to 3 crore 29 lakh 31,972. Consequently, India's recovery rate stands at 97.78%. 26,041 new cases have been reported in the last 24 hours. The active caseload is presently 2,99,620, which is 191 days, which is the lowest in the past 191 days. The active cases account for less than 1% of the total cases, which currently stands at 0.89%. And the testing capacity across the country continues to be expanded. India has so far conducted over 56.44 crore cumulative tests. While the testing capacity has been enhanced across the country, weekly positivity rate now stands at 1.94%, which remains less than 3% for the last 94 days. And the daily positivity rate is reported to be 2.24%. The daily positivity rate has remained below 3% for the last 28 days now. And India is all set to achieve the 100 crore vaccination mark, and to celebrate, the citizen engagement platform of government, MyGov India, has invited citizens to design an innovative and visually striking logo or a mascot. The logo or the mascot should represent the theme, India's journey of completing 100 crore vaccinations. The last date of the contest is 10th October this year. The winner of the selected logo will win a cash prize of 25,000 rupees. In Madhya Pradesh, fourth phase of vaccination Maya Abhiyan is being organized today. The theme of the campaign is Ab Koi Na Chhoote. Under the campaign, the first dose of vaccine will be given to people above the age of 18 years who have been left out of vaccination. In Madhya Pradesh, 4,96,367 beneficiaries have been vaccinated. Including these, so far 7,88,981 doses of vaccine have been given in the state so far. Meanwhile, 16 new cases of COVID-19 were reported in the state on Sunday, while 19 people recovered in the last 24 hours. Union Minister of State and Information and Broadcasting, Dr. L. Murugan, has reached Bhopal to take a stock of the drive. Himachal Pradesh schools reopened today. From today, the state government took the decision to reopen schools during the cabinet meeting held on Friday. Schools are reopening for classes 9 to 12th. Students from class 10th to 12th will be allowed to visit the school on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Class 9 to 11 will open on Thursday, Friday and Saturday. And today is the last day of campaigning for bypolls to the Bhawanipur Assembly seat of West Bengal. The candidates of Trinamool Congress and BJP are leaving no stone unturned to woo the electorate in their favour. Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee from the TMC is in the fray, while BJP has fielded Priyanka Tibrewal. Mamata Banerjee is campaigning with her supporters, going from every nook and corner of this constituency. From the BJP, the leader of opposition in West Bengal, Suvendu Adhikari, as well as a host of several top leaders are holding poll rallies. Polling for the bypolls will take place on the 30th of September. All right, talking about cyclonic storm Gulab, which weakened into a deep depression over North Andhra Pradesh and adjoining South Odisha. Cyclone Gulab moved westward with a speed of 14 kilometers per hour. It will further weaken into a depression during the next 12 hours. IMD has predicted light to moderate rains to continue in most places in Odisha and Andhra. NDRF and central teams continue with their road clearing and restoration work. Relief operations are underway. On Sunday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had spoken to Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy and Odisha Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik and discussed the cyclone situation. Prime Minister Modi assured both the CMs that all possible support from the centre. The Prime Minister prayed for everyone's safety and well-being. And in Andhra Pradesh, Sri Kakulam District Collector Shrikesh B. Latkar said that a total of 1,358 people were rehabilitated at 38 centres in the district. The government has set up 61 rehabilitation centres in 13 cyclone-affected coastal mandals. 3 electric poles were uprooted at Maddi Putuga village of Kachili Mandal and Harijana Street in Kasibaga, wherein the electrical department swung into action immediately to restore them. A house was damaged at Mankannapuram in Mandasa Mandal. The state disaster response team and the police, with support from locals, cleared the trees that fed on the roads in different parts. The district administration declared a holiday for schools in the cyclone-affected mandals today. In Vizag, the city was soaked following continuous rains under the influence of cyclone Gulab on Sunday. Rainfall in Visakhapatnam recorded 282 mm, in Kainagapattam 126 millimeter, in Kakinada 113 millimeter, and in Vijayawada 108 millimeter. Low-lying areas in several areas like Ghananapuram were submerged. People remained indoors due to heavy downpour associated with the winds reaching 10 to 15 kilometers during the landfall period in neighboring city Kakulam district. Railways scheduled 24 trains between Odisha and Andhra Pradesh due to the storm, while long-distance trains were short-terminated from Visakhapatnam and Bhubaneswar. Short-distance trains were cancelled till September 28th. Temporary health desks have been set up at Visakhapatnam, Vizianagaram, Srikakulam Road and Raigada stations to guide the passengers regarding the movement of train services to meet any emergency. And KVS Srinivas, Meteorologist Cyclone Warning Center, Visakhapatnam, spoke exclusively to our correspondent Tapas Bhattacharya explaining the current situation.
Joining me is KVS Srinivasan, a senior meteorologist in the department in Visakhapatnam. Let's find out what is the current status of the remnants of the cyclone Gulab, which has now turned into a deep depression. Sir, what can you tell us more about this particular cyclone or the remnants of the cyclone?
Yeah, actually this Gulab, the cyclonic storm Gulab has concentrated yesterday in the northwest Bay of Bengal and in west central Bay of Bengal around this area, and it has moved nearly westward direction and crossed North Andhra and South Orissa coast near Kalingapatnam around 19:30 and 20:30 hours east of yesterday, almost around in this direction. And it has maintained the same intensity of cyclonic storm till yesterday morning of 2:30 hours, and then it has weakened into a deep depression and laid centered around this place. And still it is maintaining the deep depression intensity, and it is moving in a nearly west-northwest direction.
Visakhapatnam is actually, if you can see, Visakhapatnam actually received almost 28 centimeter till 8:30 in the morning.
Yesterday 8:30 to today's 8:30, up to 8:30, it has recorded 280 millimeters, that is 28 centimeters. And in Vizianagaram district, there is also number of stations were recorded more than 15 centimeters. And in Srikakulam district also, it has recorded number of stations were recorded more than heavy rainfall recorded. And it has generated, and at the time of the crossing the system, and it has generated the wind speed of around 75 to 85 kilometers near this area.
Thank you so much. So that was KV Srinivasan was telling us that this particular system in the next 12 hours will turn into a depression, and then it will weaken further. But so far we can see there are places which will receive heavy to very heavy rainfall activity, and so all these people needs to be absolutely careful. If there is no work, they should avoid going out and stay safe. With camera person Sanjay Nena, this is Taposh Bhattacharya for DD India, Visakhapatnam.
And my colleague Taposh Bhattacharya joins us for more from Visakhapatnam. Taposh, you say that the storm, the cyclone has weakened into a deep depression. What is a deep depression?
Yes, it has turned into depression. By deep depression, what I meant is that the intensity of this particular, or the remnants of this particular cyclone has come down. Though when we talk about the intensity, it doesn't mean that the danger has passed. By that, what we mean is that the speed of the cyclonic circulation or the winds and the manner in which the rainfall activity is taking place, it is not in the same category as that of a cyclone or cyclones category. So, but it's still a deep depression in many ways, especially in coastal areas, can create a lot of havoc because of its close proximity with the water. With a wind speed of almost 50 to 60 kilometers, it has the potential to be dangerous. and thus there is a red alert has been sounded in many districts of Andhra Pradesh, especially in Srikakulam, Vijayanagaram, Visakhapatnam, East Godavari, West Godavari, and Krishna. So these are the places which has been declared a red alert because of intensity of this as it's turned into a deep depression. Now, and when we after a while, it is expected that by evening, late evening, this deep depression will turn into a depression, and by that, what one means is that the intensity will gradually reduce further, and it is expected that another 24 hours, this particular cyclonic or the remnants of this particular cyclone Gulab will turn into a well-marked low area. Now, when we talk about all this deep depression and well-marked low area, what we meant is that the intensity and the rainfall activity lessened up with as the time passes. But as we say that even in a deep depression or in a depression area, when especially in the coastal areas, and while it is the clouds that are currently there, it has the potential to have a disruption in life, especially places which comes under its purview. One can see that the rainfall activity as well as the high velocity of winds can create a bit of a problem, and thus necessary precautions have been taken by the state administration along with the NDRF team, which have been present in both Odisha as well as in Andhra Pradesh, making sure that no untoward incident takes place.
Apart from the rain that it's caused, has there much destruction, or what is the level of destruction that has been reported, Taposh?
Well, what we can tell you for what we've been told by our sources and as well as in the administration, there has been uprooting of trees as well as some electrical poles. But that has been taken care of. But yesterday, around midnight till around 8:30 to 9 o'clock, there was an absolute power outage in the city of Visakhapatnam. Massive power outage, and they're slowly, steadily coming back to the terms to the reality. They're slowly making sure that the power outages is being taken care of, and that is what being currently being done. We do not so far have any reports of any casualties, though there are some unconfirmed report of people missing, but there is no official response or official notification of regarding any deaths or any casualties. So what we can say is that if this holds true, then the manner in which the state disaster relief team along with the NDRF have worked day and night to mitigate the effect has actually been proved absolutely right down, and they have managed to do exactly that.
Okay, Taposh. Taposh, very quickly, how long before the danger passes?
Well, as far as Andhra Pradesh and Odisha is concerned, it will be another 12 hours at least, and one expects that by the end, by tomorrow, the situation is expected to improve manifold. As it turns tomorrow, it turns into a well-marked area. But for Chhattisgarh and some places of south coastal Odisha, their rainfall activity may pick up. In fact, what we have been told is that in some places extreme heavy rainfall can take place. So, and in Maharashtra as well as in Marathwada, also certain regions, the IMD has issued alerts so that extreme heavy rainfall can take place in those particular areas. But as far as major chunk of this particular cyclone is concerned, the major danger has dissipated. One expects that things to improve in the next 24 hours.
All right, Taposh, thank you very much for that information. You stay safe. Thank you for joining us for the moment. And moving on a recent trip to Kashmir, to Jammu and Kashmir, Union Minister for Civil Aviation Jyotiraditya Scindia and Lieutenant Governor of J&K Manoj Sinha announced starting the Srinagar-Sharjah international flight soon. Addressing media persons, the ministers made several announcements which will prove to be a milestone for the growth of air connectivity in the region. The other announcements include a new terminal building being constructed at the Jammu airport by the state government at a cost of 600 crores, for which 122 acres of land will be allotted by the Union Territory. The new terminal building will be constructed at the Srinagar airport at a cost of 1500 crore rupees. With effect from 30th November, 30% load penalty is being removed in the airlines of Jammu airport. The construction work of new cargo complex at Srinagar Airport will be completed by October 31st. A new premium lounge facility will also be made available at the Srinagar Airport. The VAT levied on air turbine fuel will be completely reduced soon. Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways Nitin Gadkari laid the foundation stone of various national highway projects in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. These projects include the Baramulla-Gulmarg National Highway 701A, the Vailu to Dhoni Pawa National Highway 244 and the Dhoni Pawa to Ashajipra National Highway 244. Besides these projects, the Union Minister also laid the foundation stone of the 4-lane 42-kilometer long ring road around Srinagar. This ring road will cost 2,948.72 crore rupees and will help in decongestion of the Srinagar city. Union Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Singh Thakur visited the historic Mata Kheer Bhavani temple in Ganderbal in Jammu and Kashmir this morning. He offered prayers there. He said people from all around the world come here to take blessings. He added that peace has been restored in Jammu and Kashmir and tourism is being promoted. He encouraged all to visit Jammu and Kashmir. Later, the Union Minister held a meeting with representatives of the District Development Council of the DDC and Block Development Council in Ganderbal. And for more on that story, I am joined by my colleague Vishal Baristo, who joins us over the phone line. Vishal, give us a sense of the importance of the national highways that the Minister today inaugurated.
A very good afternoon to you, Amritpal. Now, these national highways that the Union Minister has inaugurated today would definitely give a big boost up to the economy of the state and also promote tourism, because it has been the focus of both the government as far as the outreach program is concerned. COVID was a kind of a setback for everybody, as also for Kashmir. But now, since the vaccination drive is going on full swing, the neighboring states like Himachal, they have vaccinated 100% as far as the first dose is concerned. So, to develop the tourism, these national highways will in the coming days. Meanwhile, not only Nitin Gadkari inaugurated laid the foundation stone of these national highways, but also he would be inspecting the Zojila Tunnel. Zojila Tunnel is going to play a key role for not only for the locals because it is an all-weather tunnel. There are two portals, the West Portal and East Portal, and also the armed forces would also get a big boost up because it would connect directly to Dras and Kargil. So all these projects will play a key role as far as the economic boost up in the state is concerned. At the same time, it would also promote tourism because in winters it becomes quite inaccessible because of heavy snow.
All right. Vishal, we'll leave it there. Many thanks for joining us and giving us that update. And in Midday Prime, it's time for news and updates from the world of business. And my colleague Tanvi Taneja joins us for more on that. Good afternoon, Tanvi. Give us a sense of what's making news in the world of business.
Yes, Amrit, well, exuberance continues on Dalal Street. The domestic stock markets have swung between losses and gains on Monday, but are still going strong. So the Sensex at the BSE surged to a fresh lifetime intraday high of 60,412 in morning deals today. Later, the Sensex had gained 33 points, 0.1% to 60,081 in afternoon deals a short while ago. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange had added just 8 points to 17,861 a little while ago. The broader market is trading flat at the moment, with the BSE Mid-Cap Index declining 0.2%, while the Small Cap Index shedding 0.1%. The top index gainers are Maruti Suzuki, Mahindra & Mahindra, Bajaj Auto, SBI and NTPC
with gains of between 1.7% and 6.3%. The top index losers so far on the BSE are HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, Infosys, Bajaj Finserv and TCS, with losses of between 1.1% and 3.4%. Moving on. Other key Asian markets have been mixed on Monday amid concerns that a jump in oil prices could inflame inflation fears and aggravate the recent hawkish turn by some major central banks. So MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan inched up 0.1%, though that followed 3 consecutive weeks of losses. Japan's Nikkei 225 index and Hong Kong's Hang Seng index were both trading flat. China's Shanghai Composite Index had declined 0.8%, even as the country's central bank pumped more money into the financial system. But South Korea's Kospi Index rose 0.3% on foreign buying. Back home at the interbank forex market, the rupee had depreciated 5 paise against the dollar in opening trade on Monday on dollar demand from banks and importers. But later, in afternoon deals, the rupee had appreciated just 2 paise to 73 rupees 68 paise against the dollar. At the multi-commodity exchange, gold had gained 89 rupees to 46,084 rupees per 10 grams. Silver had climbed 496 rupees to 60,451 rupees per kilo. And shifting our attention to global crude oil prices. Now, they rose for a 5th straight day on Monday, with Brent heading for $80 a barrel amid supply concerns as part of the world sees demand pick up with the easing of the pandemic conditions. So Brent crude oil was up $1.14 or 1.5% to $79.23 a barrel. US crude added $1.11 or 1.5% to $75.09 a barrel after rising for a 5th straight week last week. Rising gas prices are also helping drive oil higher as the liquid becomes relatively cheaper for power generation. Investment bank Goldman Sachs has forecast a year-end price of Brent crude oil of $90 a barrel. Such an increase could stoke speculation that global inflation will prove longer lasting than first hoped. Meanwhile, China's power crunch caused by tight coal supplies and toughening emission standards has triggered a contraction in heavy industry across several regions and is dragging on the country's economic growth rate. China has vowed to cut energy intensity by around 3% in 2021 to meet its climate goals. Provincial authorities have stepped up enforcement of emission curbs in recent months after only 10 of the 30 mainland regions managed to achieve their energy goals in the first half of the year. Higher coal prices and tight supplies in a country that depends overwhelmingly on coal-fired power for its energy supplies has also led to the power shortage ahead of the winter heating season. And in more troubling news coming from China, cryptocurrency exchanges and providers of crypto services are scrambling to sever business ties with mainland Chinese clients after Beijing last Friday issued a blanket ban on all crypto trading and mining. Huobi Global and Binance, 2 of the world's largest exchanges popular with Chinese users, have stopped
new registrations of accounts by mainland customers. Huobi also said that it would clean up existing ones by the end of the year. So with that, it's a wrap on our Business Prime segment. For rest of the news coming in, let's go back to Amrit. Amrit, over to you.
Thank you, Tanvi, for that. And let's now take a look at what's making news across the globe. India's ambassador to China, Vikram Misri, has said that China's continuing travel ban on travelers from India is unscientific approach. The travelers include thousands of students and separated families who've been waiting to return to China for more than a year. He said such humanitarian and less complex issues need a more balanced and sensitive approach from Chinese authorities, shedding light on the prevailing tense bilateral relations at a dialogue organized by Indian and Chinese think tanks last week. Mistry said that it's not limited only to diplomacy and geopolitics. He also said that India has also attempted to keep trade and commercial relationship insulated from the current differences. For instance, by continuing to issue visas to Chinese business persons, India continues to issue visa to Chinese business persons. However, the ambassador said that India is disappointed to see an unscientific approach with regard to several problems being faced by Indian students, businessmen and marine crew and exporters. And Prasar Bharati has been continuously taking up the issue of return of more than 20,000 Indian students enrolled in Chinese universities who are waiting to return to China. Most are in medical courses and are concerned that online programs arranged by their universities will not adequately prepare them, especially in practical hands-on clinical subjects. They've also to pay full fee for online classes which are practically not of good quality due to multiple reasons. They also fear about their online degrees not being recognized. And my colleague Anshuman Mishra joins us for more from Beijing. Anshuman, when the ambassador says unscientific approach by the Chinese on the issue of travel bans and travel restrictions, what does it mean?
Amrit, this is a very serious issue because out of around 30 to 35,000 Indians who stayed in China, who were in China before the pandemic for different reasons, most of them were students, around 23,000, and out of that, most of them were for medical studies. So out of these 35,000, most of the students are back to India. They came back to India for their spring holidays last year. Then some families came back during COVID time. And all of them have been stuck in India. They are not able to return to China, separated from their families. They have been separated from their campuses. Their studies got disturbed, classes got disturbed. So this is a very serious issue for these people, which is purely humanitarian issue. And Indian ambassador, when he said that this is not something which is related to the realm of high politics, that is, it's not a very high diplomatic issue. It's purely a humanitarian issue, and it's a far less complex issue, which we can treat with little more care and a little more caution. In that sense, he said that it's an unscientific approach because when China is allowing students from certain countries like South Korea or USA, then based on COVID-19 protocols, quarantine measures, all this, why can't you allow the students who are about to complete their studies and are going to lose their year or their degrees? Because at many places, online degrees may not be recognized.
True.
So all these are serious issues. And despite repeated appeals from the students, they wrote many letters, open letters to senior authorities, leaders in China, but since so far there have been no response, neither from Chinese government in Beijing nor from Chinese embassy in Delhi. Yeah, there have been no scientific rationale so far from Chinese side as to why can't they allow students based on COVID-19 protocols, or even those family members or those people who have been vaccinated by COVID-19 vaccines made in China. So yeah, that's why it's not people are not able to digest this decision which China has been carrying. Though in today's press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry said that we are willing to discuss the matter with the relevant countries, including India. But they clearly said that it doesn't mean that they are going to resolve this issue as of now. So it means it's going to stay for some more time on this.
Also on the reciprocity basis, while India is issuing visas to Chinese businessmen, Chinese scholars who are coming here and then going back, it doesn't really make much sense, doesn't it, Anshuman?
Amrit, so India has its own policy, as Amrit mentioned, that during this difficult phase also, India has been issuing visas to Chinese businessmen, and India also tried not to disturb the trade and commerce related relations and operations, because ultimately it goes down to the lives of the common man who are somehow engaged in this supply chain and all these trade related processes. So India is following its own regime, Amrit, I would say, and the understanding which I got, but somehow China is yet to do and properly reciprocate in this sense. They have always been giving the pretext of COVID-19 cases and all. And that is the reason why I said that it is unscientific.
Also, Anshuman, I want to understand, they had said that you need to be vaccinated by Chinese vaccines to be able to travel to China. So how are the students who will be applying for visas? Are Chinese vaccines available here at the embassy? Are the embassy guys, the Chinese embassy people ready to vaccinate Indians with the Chinese vaccines?
Amrit, so far there are no such statements from Chinese embassy in Delhi or Chinese government in Beijing that they will provide Chinese vaccines. Probably people see it as an excuse, probably, or maybe a little more difficulty for people who want Chinese visa. So yeah, that's why many Indians, there were many stories in media that many people who wanted to come back to China, they got Chinese vaccines in a third country. Despite that, China did not issue any visas to them.
And
so
if I may ask, what vaccine have you got, Anshuman?
So Amrit, here in China has not allowed any foreign vaccines, not approved any foreign vaccines so far. So Chinese vaccines are available here. So of course I have taken whatever is available in the market.
Right, okay. I want to ask you, Vikram Mistry, Ambassador Vikram Mistry also pointed out very, very important things. And they were quite bold statements that sort of came out from the Indian ambassador, saying avoid shifting goalposts. What did the ambassador mean by that?
Amrit, this particular statement mainly refers to the process of disengagement, which is still not yet completed. So India is still negotiating and talking to China for complete disengagement, which happened, which is required after the situation which occurred last year. So basically, we are talking about post-Galwan incident, when there were both the troops were engaged at certain points, and so far we have disengaged at Galwan Valley, Pangong Tso, both north and south banks, and Gogra recently. Still, there are 2-3 points which are yet to be disengaged. So, during the talks, the negotiations, the WMCC negotiations are top commander level talks. What I understand that China has been making maybe different sort of demands or different kind of understanding. That's what understanding that we should avoid shifting the goalpost, and we should focus on first completing the disengagement at the LAC to maintain the peace and tranquility which got disturbed due to Galwan Valley, and later on we can talk about the larger boundary question for which there are different mechanisms. So basically what Ambassador was trying to say that don't confuse the border, day-to-day border management affairs with the larger boundary questions, which obviously is going to take some time, and there are different mechanisms.
Right. Anshuman Mishra, many thanks for joining us and sharing your insights with us. Thank you. Meanwhile, Iceland briefly celebrated electing a female majority parliament on Sunday before a recount produced a result just short of that landmark for gender parity in North Atlantic island nation. For the first time in an Icelandic and European politics, there are now more women lawmakers than men in parliament. According to final election results released on Sunday, some 33 women were voted into the 63 seat parliament. Iceland has become the first European country where women make up more than half of all lawmakers. The only other European country to come close is Sweden, with 47% of women lawmakers, according to data from the World Bank. Iceland now joins the short list of countries where women outnumber men in parliament, including Rwanda, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico and the United Arab Emirates. Iceland's ruling coalition retained its majority in Saturday's elections, even as Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir's party suffered losses. And in Germany, people appeared to vote for change on Sunday, with a majority of voting districts reporting the Social Democratic Party had a slim lead, hovering around 26%, more than a percentage point ahead of Christian Democratic Union, which has just over 24% of the vote. Early exit polls show an extremely close race between the centre-left Social Democratic Party, the SPD, and the centre-right Christian Democratic Union, CDU, in an election that will decide the next chancellor of the country. Germans went to polls to elect the next parliament, which will appoint Chancellor Angela Merkel's successor. After almost 16 years in top job, Merkel decided to step down after the election. Candidates who are in the fray to replace Merkel are Armin Laschet, a longtime ally of Merkel and a leader of the CDU since January, Olaf Scholz, the leader of the left-leaning SPD, and the Greens, Annalena Baerbock. Environmental concerns and economic worries have emerged as key issues in campaigning. And that's it then in Midday Prime. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.